Yeah, hello everyone. Is my voice audible, guys?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just restart our server. Yeah, so this is our sign in page. Yesterday we have seen, right, how we can navigate from sign in to home page on entering the proper credentials or valid credentials. So here I'm adding sagar@gmail.com and here sagar@123. If I sign in, I got here home component. Now here we wanted that name, the user who got logged in, his name we wanted here. And if I click on logout, we are back to sign in. So for this, yesterday we have done some changes in the backend, right? So if I go to backend controller, auth controller, now I will minimize this create user in the sign in. So once our email ID and password are confirmed, then we are passing one response back to the client. In that response, if you observe, we are passing OK as a true, result as valid user, and here user as a user data. So now our front end is going to receive that data. So if I just expand my front end folder, if I go to src, if I go to sign in under pages, if I go to sign in.js, now here we are going to receive that data. So just to check whether we are receiving the data or not, I will add here console.log and I will say response.data. Let's see whether we are getting the logged in user data or not. So let's inspect. Let's go to the console and let's add here sagar@gmail.com, sagar@123. Click on sign in. If I click on sign in, here I got OK true, result valid user, and that user information also I got. So if I expand that user, what information we are receiving? We are receiving CT, email, gender, password, phone, username, and here we are receiving two more extra properties which are sent by our MongoDB. So ID of the user we are getting. So now here let's try some other user, raj@gmail.com, 12345. Now again, if I click on sign in, now here let's see whether we are getting Raj information or not. So if I expand, here also I'm getting Raj information. So now whenever we log in, if that user is valid, then we are getting that user information back from the backend. We are getting that information back from the backend. And here width I will make it 600. So this is our sign in component. We have our backend. We have our database. Now from front end, we are sending the request to this backend. Now this backend is validating our data with the database. And if that user is valid, then that user database is sending to backend. And now that backend is sending that data back to our sign in component. Now, once we receive that data, what we need to do, this data, whatever we have received from the backend, that data we have to add inside the context. So we have to create one context, and in that context, we have to add the data. we have to add the data. So here data will be added. And now once we add the data in the context, we are switching from this login component. We are switching from login component to home component. This is our home component. Now, whenever this home component loads, what we need to do? We have to fetch that data, whatever data we have stored in the user context, right? That data we have to fetch and we have to display here. That's it. So we are able to share the data from sign in component to this component. Now this both the components are present in app. So in app component, we have to render this provider component of this context. In the app, we have to render so that you can share the data with sign in also and this home also. Okay, now how we are going to do here, see here. Now inside the context, we will create one more context called user context or logged in user context .js. We will import here create context from React. We will call that create context. It will return the context to us. We can hold in one variable logged in user context, and we can export default logged in user context. Now we can go to main.jsx, or let me go to app.jsx. Here we will import logged in user context, and here we will access logged in user context dot provider. Now inside this logged in context dot provider, we will wrap our all the routes component, but already there is a auth context, so no problem. We can wrap here our logged in context also. Like this we can wrap. So now this components, so our home component, our sign in component, our sign up component can access the data from auth context also. They can access the data from logged in context also. So from both the contexts, they can access the data. Okay. So now we have created one context. Like this context is created. Now, once we get the data, now this is sign in component. Remember, this is your sign in component. Now this sign in component should add the data in the context. The sign in component should add the data in the context. But this context we are using inside the app component. It means app is a parent component, and in this app component we are using this provider component. Now this app component only can store the data inside this context. Sign in component directly it cannot store the data. Sign in component directly it cannot store the data. So what we will do here, we will create one state. We will say logged in user, comma, set logged in user. equals to use state. And by default, I will store here value as a null. Now this logged in user and this set logged in user, this both the variable and function, I will store inside this context. I will store inside this context. Okay, how to store? For that, I can take value props. And here I can pass one object. In that object, I can pass logged in user, comma, set is logged in. Sorry, set logged in user. Now you want to store some data here inside this state. And that data you can store only through this setter function. So what I will do now? Now in this context, see here. In this context, what we are doing right now, we are storing one state variable and one setter function. These are the two things we are storing in the context. Now what this sign in component should do, whenever it receives the response, that response, whatever data it is getting from the backend that the user who got logged in, his data sign in component is receiving, sign in component somehow that data it should store inside this state, which is present inside the context. So how sign in component can store that data inside this state? For that, what this sign in component will do, from this context, it will access this setter function. And it will call that setter function. Whenever sign in calls setter function, now what this setter function will do, it will update the data in this state. After updating the data in this state, we are navigating from sign in component to the home component. Now in home component, what we have to do, from this context, we have to access this state and we have to display the data. We have to display the data. So let's see it works or not. So already in the context, we are storing logged in user, set logged in user. Now we will go to sign in component. Now here, use context already imported. Now we will import logged in user context. And here I will destructure and call user context and I will pass here logged in user context. And from this logged in user context, I will access set is set logged in user setter function. So this function I will access set logged in user. And that function set logged in user function I will give to here. This we have sign in function, right? To this sign in function I will give here as a argument. Now that function we can access in our JS file of sign in as a parameter. And once we get the confirmation, here. Once we get the confirmation here, after showing toast message, login here. Before this, I will call that set logged in user and I will pass the data response.data.user.